All right, so this section we're going to talk about rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. So let's go ahead and define each one first. I'm going to get a different color here. I don't like red. So let's do a rhombus. What is a rhombus? A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Okay, so I'm going to draw one over here. 4 congruent sides. There's your rhombus. Okay, next one is a rectangle. What's a rectangle? A rectangle is a parallelogram. And I'm saying they're a parallelogram because we want to know that all of the theorems we've learned this far are still true for these figures. We're just adding on another piece of information. With 4 right angles. So here is your rectangle. And then we have a square. What's a square? A square is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. So 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Now, if this Venn diagram helps you, I would put it in your notes. If it doesn't, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to draw a Venn diagram down here. I'm going to have a nice big square, rectangle, whatever. And within that rectangle, this is going to be, oh my, this is going to be parallelograms as our title. Okay, I'm going to draw 2 lovely parallelograms over here. Here's one. Here's another one. Okay, now I'm going to have 2 ovals. This oval is going to have a rhombus. This one is going to have a rectangle. And when we put everything that's true about a rhombus and a rectangle together, we get a square. So a rhombus has 4 equal sides. A rectangle has 4 90-degree angles. And a square has both. Okay, and a rhombus, square, and rectangle are all parallelograms. So all the things we've already learned are true. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles add to 180. Okay, all of those things are still true. Let's try some. So the first one we're going to try, I'm going to tell you that PQRS is a rhombus. Solve for y. So here's our lovely rhombus. We have 2y plus 3 and 5y minus 6. Well, what do we know about a rhombus? A rhombus has what? If I look right above, 4 equal sides. So all these sides are equal. So what am I going to do to solve? I'm going to set those 2 sides equal to each other. I'm going to get my y's on one side. I'm going to add 6 to get my numbers on the other side, and then divide by 3 to finish it off. So y is 3. Okay, if it asks to find the actual side, we would plug it back in. Okay, you try this one. So PQRS is a square. Solve for y, or x. All right, next one. We've got a couple theorems to go over that go with rhombuses and rectangles. The first one is theorem 611, and that says a parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if, I'm going to shorthand it, IFF, if and only if the diagonals are perpendicular. What's perpendicular mean? They meet at a 90-degree angle. So this guy's a rhombus if I know that these diagonals meet at a 90-degree angle. Next one's theorem 6.12. A parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. What does that mean? If this is my figure and I draw in my diagonals, that means if this is going to be a rhombus, that means the diagonals have to bisect each of the angles that they're basically cutting the angles in half that they're going through. So these would all be true. Okay. Last one. (613). Okay. A parallelogram is a rectangle if and only if the diagonals are congruent. So we know this guy's a rectangle if these diagonals are congruent. So let's call this A, B, C, D, which means AD would be congruent to CB. Okay, so those are your theorems. Now let's practice a couple. Let's see, this should be number 2. So if I tell you, we're going to solve for x, if I tell you that ABCD is a rhombus, and then I give you this picture. Here's A, B, C, D. Here's 130. Here's x. All right, so for a rhombus, we don't really know anything special about the angles. They're not all 90 degrees, right? But we do know a rhombus is a parallelogram. We know that in a parallelogram, opposite angles are congruent, but I'm not given opposite angles. We also know in a parallelogram that consecutive angles, the ones that are next to each other, add to 180. So we have x plus 130 equals 180. I'm going to subtract 130 from each side, so x is 50. Next one, I'm going to tell you ABCD is a rectangle. And then I'm going to give you this information down here. This is x plus 40. This is 2x minus 10. All right, so if this is a rectangle, I know the parallelograms, the angles next to each other add to 180. So I could just add these to 180. But there's actually an easier way to solve. What do we know about rectangles? We know that rectangles, if we scroll up to the top of our notes, rectangles have all 90-degree angles. So I can take either of these angles and set it equal to 90. And I should get the exact same thing since they're the same variable. So on this one, x comes out to be 50. And if I had taken this one, I should get the same thing. Yep, x came out to be 50. So there you go. Next one. I'm going to tell you this is a parallelogram. Now in a parallelogram, I have my diagonals drawn in. What do we know about the diagonals in a parallelogram? We know that the diagonals bisect each other. What's it mean to bisect each other? That means they cut each other in half. So this guy would be cut in half, making two congruent pieces. So how would I solve? I would set these equal. There's your answer. Okay, now you try this last one. I'm going to tell you it's a rhombus. Go ahead and solve.